I never imagined that the thing slowly destroying my relationship wouldn't be cheating, lying, or some dramatic betrayal. It was something so small that at first I thought I was just being selfish. If someone had asked me a year ago whether I had a healthy relationship, I would have smiled and said yes without hesitation. My name is Emma Carter. I'm 23 years old and I live just outside Seattle, Washington. I work full-time as a graphic designer for a marketing agency. It's not my dream job, but I enjoy it enough and it pays my bills. Most evenings, all I wanted after work was to make a cup of coffee, put on a hoodie, sit in front of my art desk, and lose myself in painting or digital illustrations for a few hours. That quiet time wasn't just a hobby, it was how I recharged. I've always been the kind of person who needed silence after being around people all day. Even growing up, my parents joked that I had a social battery that died faster than everyone else's. I never thought there was anything wrong with that. Then I met Ryan. Ryan was 23 too. We met through mutual friends at a 4th of July barbecue. He was confident without being arrogant, funny in a goofy way, and one of those people who could start a conversation with absolutely anyone. He asked for my number before the night ended. I said yes. Our first few months together felt easy. We went on late-night drives, tried every taco truck we could find around Seattle, watched terrible horror movies, and laughed more than I'd laughed in years. He made me feel safe. For the first time, I could actually picture building a future with someone. About 6 months into our relationship, our jobs changed. My company switched to a hybrid schedule while Ryan still had to commute 3 days a week. Coincidentally, our offices were only a few blocks apart, so we started driving to work together. At first, it seemed perfect. We'd grab coffee before work, complain about traffic, and stop somewhere for dinner on the way home. I loved those little routines, but after a while, I noticed something. On the days we commuted together, we'd leave my apartment around 7 in the morning and wouldn't really separate until nearly 9 that night. By the time he went home, I was exhausted. Not because of him specifically, just because I hadn't been alone all day. I kept telling myself it wasn't a big deal. Good girlfriends wanted to spend time with their boyfriends, right? So why did I secretly count down the minutes until I had my apartment to myself? I hated myself for thinking that way. Every Thursday, Ryan worked from home while I went into the office alone. That evening became my only guaranteed time every week to clean my apartment, catch up on laundry, paint, answer messages I'd ignored for days, and simply exist without talking to anyone. Thursday became my favorite day of the week, not because I didn't miss Ryan, but because I missed myself. I never told him that. I was afraid he'd think it meant I loved him less. Instead, I smiled whenever he asked if I wanted him to come over. Sometimes I'd even say yes, even when every part of me wanted just one quiet evening. At first, it didn't seem like a problem. Until Ryan started noticing. One Thursday night, while I was organizing paintbrushes on my desk, my phone buzzed. "Ryan, miss me yet?" I smiled and replied. Of course, a few seconds later, another message appeared. "So, can I come over?" I stared at the screen. My apartment was finally quiet. A candle burned beside my canvas. Rain tapped softly against the windows. For the first time all week, I felt like I could actually breathe. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I didn't want to hurt him. But I also didn't want to give up the only evening that belonged to me, so I typed, "Can we hang out tomorrow instead? I really need tonight to recharge." The typing bubble appeared almost immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "Recharge from me," the moment I read those 3 words. My stomach dropped. I stared at Ryan's message for what felt like forever. "Recharge from me," 3 simple words, but somehow they made me feel like I'd done something wrong. I quickly typed back, "No, not from you, just from everything. Work has been exhausting and I really need a quiet night to myself." He didn't reply for almost 20 minutes. Normally, Ryan answered within seconds. The silence made me more anxious than any argument ever could. When my phone finally buzzed, I almost wished I hadn't picked it up. Okay, that was it. No heart emoji, no talk tomorrow, just okay. The next morning, I convinced myself I was overthinking things. Maybe he was busy, maybe he'd gone to bed early. Maybe everything was completely fine, but when I met him at our usual coffee shop before work, something felt different. He hugged me, he smiled, he kissed my forehead, yet somehow he felt distant. The drive to work was unusually quiet. Ryan usually filled every moment with random stories, podcasts, or terrible singing. That morning, he mostly stared at the road. I asked if everything was okay. He smiled without looking at me. "Yeah, just tired." I wanted to believe him, I really did, but deep down I knew something had changed. Over the next few weeks, little comments started slipping into our conversations. If I mentioned spending Saturday painting, he'd laugh and say, "Your art gets more attention than I do." If I spent an hour cleaning my apartment while he was over, he'd jokingly ask, "Should I make an appointment if I want quality time?" He always laughed afterward. So I laughed too, even though the jokes didn't feel funny. They felt like tiny reminders that I was disappointing him. Then came another Thursday, the one evening I'd been looking forward to all week. I'd ordered takeout, bought a new fantasy novel, and planned to spend the night doing absolutely nothing productive. Around 6 o'clock, my phone buzzed, a TikTok sent by Ryan. I opened it without thinking. It was a smiling woman packing an elaborate homemade lunch before sunrise while cheerful music played in the background. The caption read, "When you truly love your man, this is just the bare minimum." I frowned. Maybe he just thought it was funny. I ignored it. 10 minutes later, another TikTok. This one listed things every girlfriend should naturally do: cook for him, pack his lunch, keep his apartment clean, plan date nights, support his dreams without complaining. At the end, the creator smiled into the camera. "Ladies, if you're not doing these things, someone else happily will." I felt my jaw tighten. Ryan added a single message underneath. "Kinda cute lol." Cute? Was he serious? We didn't even live together, we both worked full-time. And somehow I was supposed to feel inspired by strangers telling women they weren't doing enough. I locked my phone and tossed it onto the couch. For the rest of the evening, I couldn't focus on my painting. Those videos kept replaying in my head. It wasn't about making lunch or cooking or cleaning, it was the message behind them. It felt less like, "Look at this funny video," and more like, "Why aren't you like this?" The next day, I decided not to bring it up. I didn't want to start an argument over TikTok, but then he sent another one and another. Soon it became almost every other day. Some were obviously jokes, others didn't feel like jokes at all. One Friday evening, while we were eating dinner at my apartment, Ryan casually looked around the kitchen. "You know," he said, "when we move in together, it'll be nice coming home to a cooked meal once in a while." I looked up from my plate. "You'll be cooking too, right?" He laughed. "Yeah, sometimes." That one word echoed in my mind for the rest of the night, because suddenly, those TikToks didn't feel random anymore. They felt like a preview of what he expected our future to look like. And for the first time since we started talking about moving in together, I wasn't excited anymore, I was scared. That night after Ryan went home, I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation. Maybe I was overreacting, maybe he really was joking. But the more I replayed everything in my head, the harder it became to ignore the pattern. It wasn't just the TikToks. It wasn't just the comments about dinner. It was all the little moments I'd brushed aside because they seemed too small to matter. The next morning, I called my older sister, Megan. If anyone could tell me whether I was losing my mind, it was her. She was 31, married for 5 years, and somehow managed to balance a demanding nursing job with family life. After listening quietly for almost 20 minutes, she asked me one question. "Emma, when you're with Ryan, do you feel more like yourself, or less?" I didn't answer because I already knew. When I first met Ryan, I felt confident, creative, and relaxed. Lately, I felt guilty. Guilty for wanting to paint, guilty for wanting to clean my apartment, guilty for needing a quiet evening. Even guilty for feeling annoyed by those TikToks. Megan sighed. "You know what worries me?" "What?" "You're spending more time explaining why your needs are valid than asking whether he's respecting them." Her words stayed with me all weekend. Sunday afternoon, Ryan came over. I decided I wasn't going to avoid the conversation anymore. We ordered pizza and watched a movie, but I barely followed the plot. As the credits rolled, I muted the TV. "Can we talk about something?" Ryan looked at me and smiled. "Sure." I took a deep breath. "The TikToks you've been sending me." His smile faded slightly. "What about them? Honestly, they bother me." He looked surprised. "Seriously?" "Yeah." I tried to keep my voice calm. "It feels like you're trying to tell me what kind of girlfriend I should be instead of just talking to me." He laughed softly. "Emma, they're just TikToks." "Maybe. But you've sent a lot of them." "Because I thought they were funny." I held his gaze. "Did you really?" For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he leaned back on the couch. "Okay. Maybe I agreed with some of them." There it was, finally, the honesty I'd been waiting for. "What exactly do you agree with?" I asked. Ryan shrugged. "I don't think it's unreasonable to want a girlfriend who takes care of me sometimes. I do take care of you." "I know." He reached for my hand. "But relationships are about effort." I nodded. "I agree. Then what's wrong with making me lunch once in a while?" "Nothing. Or cooking dinner." "Nothing. So why are you upset?" "Because that wasn't the point." I looked down at our hands. Ryan, if you asked me directly, I'd probably say yes most of the time. Then why does it matter? Because it feels like you're slowly creating a list of things I'm supposed to do to prove I love you. He frowned. That's not what I'm doing, maybe not intentionally. I paused before continuing, but every time I want one evening to myself, every time I spend time on my hobbies, every time I don't do something you expected, I end up feeling like I'm failing some invisible test. Ryan didn't interrupt for the first time all evening, he simply listened. I wasn't sure if that was a good sign, or the calm before another argument. Ryan sat quietly for several seconds. He looked down at the coffee table, then back at me. I didn't realize you felt that way, he said softly. I know, I replied, because I haven't been honest about it. That was true. Every time I felt overwhelmed, I smiled. Every time I wanted to be alone, I made an excuse. Every time something bothered me, I convinced myself it wasn't worth mentioning. Eventually, all those little feelings piled up until I didn't even recognize myself anymore. Ryan rubbed the back of his neck. So, you think I'm controlling? The question caught me off guard. I shook my head. No, I think you're asking for something that comes naturally to you but doesn't come naturally to me. He looked confused. What do you mean? You recharge by being around people, I explained. I recharge by being alone, he nodded slowly. I guess that's true. When we spend 3 days commuting together, have dinner together, text all day, and then spend most weekends together, I start feeling mentally exhausted. Ryan frowned. But I thought couples were supposed to want that. Some do, and you don't. I want time with you, I said honestly, but I also need time by myself. Those two things aren't opposites. He leaned back against the couch. I never looked at it like that. For the first time since the conversation started, I felt hopeful. Maybe we were finally understanding each other. Then Ryan asked something I wasn't expecting. Can I ask you something without you getting mad? Of course. He hesitated before speaking. Sometimes I wonder if you actually love me. My heart sank. Why would you think that? Because you're always excited to go home. I blinked. What? You always seem relieved when it's time for me to leave. I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out because he wasn't entirely wrong. I was relieved. Not because I wanted him gone, because I desperately needed quiet. I reached for his hand. Ryan, when you leave, I'm not happy because you're gone. He looked at me. I'm happy because I finally get a chance to recharge. There was a huge difference. I just wasn't sure he could see it. I've never been in a relationship before you, he admitted. So I guess I imagined that if two people really loved each other, they'd want to spend every free minute together. I smiled sadly. I used to think that too. You don't anymore. No. Why? Because that's not sustainable. He looked away. I guess I thought if you needed space. It meant I was doing something wrong. I squeezed his hand. This isn't about something you're doing. It's about who I am. I'm an introvert. Ryan, I always will be. I need quiet. I need hobbies. I need evenings where I don't talk to anyone. And if I don't get those things, I paused. I become someone I don't like. Ryan stayed silent. A few moments later, he asked the question I'd secretly been dreading. So, what happens when we move in together? The room fell completely silent because I didn't have an answer, not yet. Ryan's question hung in the air. So, what happens when we move in together? Neither of us spoke for several seconds. I stared at the empty pizza box on the coffee table, trying to organize my thoughts. The truth was, I'd been asking myself that same question for weeks. Before all of this, moving in together had felt exciting. We'd spent evenings scrolling through apartment listings, arguing over whether we wanted a balcony, laughing about whose furniture we'd keep. I'd even started a Pinterest board with kitchen ideas and cozy living room setups. Now, every time I imagined sharing a home, I didn't picture movie nights or Sunday breakfasts. I pictured never being alone. Finally, I took a deep breath. I don't think we should move in together yet. Ryan looked up so quickly that I almost regretted saying it. What? I think we're rushing it. His expression changed instantly. So now you don't want to live with me? That's not what I said. It sounds like it. I shook my head. I'm saying we need to figure this out first. He stood up and walked toward the window. Outside, the Seattle rain had started again, tiny drops racing down the glass. He folded his arms. I thought we were on the same page. I thought we were too. The room felt painfully quiet. After a long pause, he turned back to face me. So what exactly do you need? For the first time in weeks, I answered honestly. I need one evening every week that's completely mine. He nodded slowly. Okay, I need to be able to paint or play video games without feeling guilty. Another nod. And if you're at my apartment, I need to be able to do laundry or clean without worrying that you'll think I'm ignoring you." Ryan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked back over and sat across from me. "I honestly didn't realize I was making you feel guilty." "I know, he sighed. "I miss you a lot, even after spending so much time together." "I know," I whispered. "When I'm not with you, I want to be. And when I'm with you," he searched for the right words. "I want your attention." There it was, not anger, not manipulation, just honesty. I understood it, but understanding it didn't make my own needs disappear. "I can't give someone my full attention every minute we're together," I said gently. "Sometimes I need to exist quietly beside the person I love." Ryan looked confused. "What does that even look like?" I smiled faintly. "It looks like you sitting on the couch reading or watching a game while I paint. It looks like me folding laundry while you play on your phone. It looks like us being together." Without needing to entertain each other, he thought about that for a long moment. "My parents were never like that," he admitted. "They did everything together, and mine didn't," I replied. "My mom used to spend hours gardening while my dad worked in the garage. They weren't ignoring each other. They were just comfortable." Ryan leaned back, letting out a slow breath. "I don't know if I'm good at that. You don't have to be perfect," I said, "but if we're going to live together someday, we both have to learn." For the first time that evening, he smiled. "A small one, I'm willing to try." I smiled back. I wanted to believe him, I really did, but deep down, a tiny voice in the back of my mind kept asking the same question. What if trying isn't enough, because some differences aren't about effort? Sometimes they're about compatibility, and I wasn't sure which one this was. For the next couple of weeks, things actually seemed better. Ryan stopped sending me the bare minimum girlfriend TikToks. He even apologized one evening while we were driving home from work. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, keeping his eyes on the road. "I honestly didn't realize those videos were making you feel judged." Hearing him say that lifted a weight off my shoulders. "Thank you," I replied. "That really means a lot." He reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'll stop," and he did, at least for a while. I started believing that maybe we'd finally figured things out. Every Thursday became my Emma night. No guilt, no unexpected visits, no passive-aggressive messages. Ryan even texted me one Thursday afternoon. "Enjoy your recharge night. I'll see you tomorrow." Read, I smiled so hard that my coworkers noticed. For the first time in months, I felt hopeful. Maybe relationships really were about learning each other's language. Maybe this was what compromise looked like. Then, about 3 weeks later, something happened that made all that hope disappear. It was a Saturday morning. Ryan had stayed over the night before, and I woke up earlier than he did. The apartment was completely quiet. I made myself a cup of coffee, put on one of my favorite playlists, and decided to clean the kitchen before he woke up. I wasn't cleaning because I felt obligated. I just like starting my weekends with a clean apartment. About 20 minutes later, Ryan walked into the kitchen, still half asleep. He wrapped his arms around my waist from behind. "Morning," he mumbled. "Morning." For a few minutes, everything felt normal. Then he looked at the sink. "You know," he said casually, "you'd make an amazing wife." I laughed. "What brought that on?" He pointed toward the dishes I'd already washed. "You always take care of everything." I shrugged. "I just like a clean kitchen." He smiled. I could get used to this. Something about the way he said it made me pause. "What do you mean?" "Oh, nothing." He poured himself a cup of coffee. "I'm just saying. It'd be nice coming home to this every day." I turned off the faucet. "Ryan, what?" "I clean because it's my apartment." "I know, and if we lived together," he smiled. "We'd both live there." "Exactly. So we'd both clean." For a second he didn't say anything, then he chuckled. "Yeah, of course," but it didn't sound convincing. Later that afternoon, we went grocery shopping together. As we walked through the store, Ryan grabbed a family-sized package of chicken and dropped it into the cart. I looked at him. "Planning a feast," he grinned, "just thinking ahead." "To what?" "When we live together," I laughed. "We don't even have an apartment yet." "I know." Then he looked at me with a smile that slowly turned serious. "I can't wait to come home every day." "Me too. And knowing you'll already be there." I frowned slightly. "What makes you think I'll be home first?" He blinked. "I don't know. I just assumed. My job usually ends later than yours." "Oh," he scratched the back of his neck. "I guess I never thought about that." That sentence stayed with me the entire drive home. He'd never thought about it, not once. Somehow, in every version of our future he'd imagined, I was already home, dinner was already started, the apartment was already clean. Not because we'd talked about it, because he'd simply assumed, and for the first time, I started wondering how many other assumptions were hiding beneath the surface. That night, after Ryan went home, I couldn't stop replaying our conversations. None of his comments had been openly demanding. He'd never looked at me and said, "You should cook for me." He'd never told me it was my responsibility to clean, but somehow, every little comment pointed in the same direction. It wasn't one big red flag, it was 100 tiny ones. I opened my laptop, hoping to distract myself with some digital painting. Instead, I found myself staring at a blank canvas. My mind kept drifting back to our future. I pictured us living together, Ryan walking through the front door after work, me sitting at my desk with my headphones on, completely focused on a project. Would he smile and let me finish, or would he quietly wonder why dinner wasn't ready? The fact that I didn't know the answer bothered me more than I wanted to admit. A few days later, my best friend Sophie invited me out for coffee. We'd known each other since freshman year of college, and she had an annoying habit of noticing things I was trying to hide. The moment I sat down, she tilted her head. "Okay, what's going on?" I laughed nervously. "What makes you think something's wrong? You've stirred your coffee for 2 minutes and haven't taken a single sip," I sighed. "I think Ryan and I want different kinds of relationships." She didn't interrupt, she just listened while I explained everything, the tick-tocks, the conversations, the guilt. The constant feeling that I had to earn my alone time. When I finally finished, Sophie asked one question. "When was the last time you spent an entire day without worrying about how Ryan would feel?" I opened my mouth, then closed it again. I honestly couldn't remember. Even on my so-called free weekends, I'd check my phone every hour. If I didn't answer quickly enough, he'd text again. "Everything okay? You disappeared. Are you still painting?" None of the messages were mean, but together they made it feel impossible to truly disconnect. Sophie leaned forward. "Emma, you know what this sounds like. What? You've slowly started organizing your entire life around avoiding disappointing him." The words hit me harder than I expected. Because she was right, without realizing it, I'd started making decisions based on how Ryan might react. I'd finish painting early, I'd postpone laundry, I'd skip reading a book. Not because I wanted to, but because I didn't want him to think I was choosing those things over him. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped choosing myself. That Friday, Ryan came over after work. Everything seemed normal. We ordered takeout, watched a baseball game, talked about apartments. Then while scrolling through rental listings, he smiled. "I found one." I looked over. It was a beautiful one-bedroom apartment overlooking the water. Large windows, modern kitchen, hardwood floors. It was gorgeous, until I noticed the monthly rent. "Ryan, this is way over our budget." "I know, but if we split it," I shook my head, "we'd barely have anything left over." He looked disappointed. "I just thought," "What?" He smiled sheepishly. "I figured you'd probably stop doing freelance design once we moved in." I stared at him. "Why would I do that? So you wouldn't be so busy?" I blinked. "My freelance work pays for my vacations." "I know, but we'd have more time together." There it was again. Without realizing it, his solution to almost every problem was the same. Less of my hobbies, less of my work, less of the things that made me, and more time focused on us. For the first time since we started dating, a thought crossed my mind that terrified me. What if Ryan wasn't asking me to make room for him in my life? What if he expected my life to revolve around him? That thought stayed with me long after he'd fallen asleep on my couch, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't convince myself it wasn't true. I barely slept that night. Ryan was asleep on my couch, completely peaceful. I lay awake in my bedroom, staring at the ceiling. The apartment was silent, but my mind wasn't. I kept asking myself the same question. Was I being unfair, or was I finally seeing things clearly? The next morning, I woke up early and decided to go for a walk by myself. I left Ryan a note on the kitchen counter, went to grab some coffee, be back soon, read the air was cool and the streets were almost empty. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't thinking about work or chores, I was thinking about us, about who we were becoming. When I got back about 40 minutes later, Ryan was sitting at my kitchen table. He wasn't angry, but he definitely wasn't happy. "You left without waking me up?" I set my coffee down. "I didn't want to disturb you. You could have invited me. I wanted a little time to myself." He let out a quiet sigh. Again, that one word hit me harder than I expected. Again. As if wanting an hour alone was becoming some kind of problem, I pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. "Ryan, can I ask you something?" "Sure. When you imagine us living together," he smiled. "Yeah, do you imagine us doing everything together?" He thought for a second. Mostly, what about if I want to spend Saturday painting for 6 hours?" He shrugged. "I'd probably want to hang out with you. and if I still wanted to paint, his smile faded. I guess I'd wonder why you didn't want to spend the day with me. I nodded slowly. That's exactly what I've been trying to explain. He looked confused. I don't get it, I know. For a moment, neither of us spoke, then I asked another question. What would you do if I wanted to take a weekend trip with my sister? He answered almost immediately. I'd want to come. What if it was just sisters? I'd probably feel left out. And if I wanted one night every week completely to myself? He looked down at the table. I'd probably wonder why I wasn't enough. There it was, not anger, not control, fear. For the first time I could see what was underneath everything. It wasn't really about dinners or TikToks or chores. Ryan genuinely believed that the more two people loved each other, the more time they should spend together. To him, distance felt like rejection. To me, distance was how I stayed emotionally healthy. Neither of us was trying to hurt the other. We were simply speaking two completely different emotional languages. I reached across the table and held his hand. Ryan, you are enough, he looked at me, but no one can be my entire world, his eyes filled with emotion. And I don't want to be, I smiled sadly. Then you have to let me have a world outside of us. For a long moment he didn't say anything. Finally he whispered, I don't know how. My heart broke a little when I heard those words because they were honest, and honesty doesn't automatically fix a relationship. Sometimes it simply reveals how much work still needs to be done. Ryan's words stayed with me for days. I don't know how. The more I thought about them, the more I realized he wasn't trying to be cruel. He wasn't trying to control me. He genuinely didn't know what a healthy amount of independence looked like in a relationship. Still, understanding where someone's behavior comes from doesn't make its impact disappear. The following Tuesday, I had lunch with one of my coworkers, Natalie. We'd worked together for almost 2 years and she'd been married to her husband, Chris, for nearly 7. Somehow they always seemed balanced. They loved spending time together, but they also had their own lives. As we sat outside with our salads, I casually asked, "Can I ask you something kind of random?" She smiled. "When have you ever asked me a normal question?" I laughed. "Do you and Chris spend every evening together?" She looked confused. "No, really, of course not." She took a sip of her iced tea before continuing. "Tuesday nights he plays basketball with his friends. Wednesday nights I go to pottery class. Sometimes we're both home, but we're doing completely different things." I blinked. "And neither of you gets upset?" She actually laughed. "Emma, we drive each other crazy if we expected constant attention." That sentence echoed in my head the rest of the afternoon. Constant attention, that was exactly what had been exhausting me, not spending time together, feeling like every moment together required my full focus. That evening, Ryan came over after work. Things felt normal. We cooked dinner together, laughed while trying to follow a recipe we'd both underestimated, and even danced around the kitchen when one of our favorite songs came on. For a little while, everything felt like it used to. Then, while we were eating, Ryan looked at me. "I've been thinking," I smiled. "That's usually dangerous," he chuckled. "Very funny." Then his expression turned serious. "I think we should start apartment hunting again." I put my fork down. "I thought we agreed to slow down." "I know, but I think we can make this work." I hesitated. "What changed?" He leaned forward. "I've been making a real effort." "You have." I stopped sending the TikToks. "You did." "I've respected your Thursday nights." "You have." "So?" He reached across the table. "Doesn't that prove I'm trying?" I looked at him. "It proves you're trying. Then why do you still seem unsure?" "Because I was." Not because I doubted his effort, because I wasn't sure effort alone could change deeply rooted expectations. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom. "Family barbecue next Saturday. Hope you can make it." I smiled. I haven't seen my family in almost a month. Ryan glanced at the screen. "Oh, next Saturday?" "Yeah," he nodded slowly. "I was actually planning a surprise date for us." I looked at him apologetically. "I'm sorry, I already promised my mom I'd come." His smile faded just a little. "I guess we can do it another weekend." The words were kind, but the disappointment on his face was impossible to miss, and suddenly, I found myself feeling guilty. Again, I hadn't canceled on him. I hadn't done anything wrong. I was simply spending one afternoon with my family, yet somehow, it still felt like I was letting him down. That was the moment I realized something that scared me. The guilt wasn't coming from one argument, or one TikTok, or one expectation. It had slowly become my default emotion. And I couldn't remember the last time I made a decision without wondering how Ryan would feel about it first. Saturday afternoon arrived faster than I expected. For the first time in weeks, I was genuinely excited. My parents were hosting a family barbecue at their house just outside Seattle, and my older sister, Megan, was bringing her husband and their 2 kids. My younger cousin had just gotten accepted into college, so everyone finally had a reason to get together. Ryan wasn't invited, not because my family didn't like him. This was something we'd planned months ago, and it had always been just immediate family. The night before, I reminded him. "I'll probably be gone most of the afternoon tomorrow, but I'll call you when I get home." He replied almost instantly. "Have fun." Read it seemed normal. I felt relieved. By noon the next day, I was sitting in my parents' backyard with a plate full of burgers, laughing so hard that my stomach hurt, for the first time in what felt like forever. I wasn't checking my phone every few minutes. I was simply enjoying being present. Around 3 o'clock, I finally glanced at my screen. 5 missed messages, 2 missed calls, all from Ryan. My stomach tightened. The first message read, "Everything okay? 10 minutes later, haven't heard from you." Another 15 minutes passed. "Are you still at your parents' house? Then I guess you're busy." And finally, "Call me when you have a minute." None of the messages were angry, none of them were rude. But reading them all together made my chest feel heavy. I stepped away from the backyard and called him. He answered on the first ring. Hey, I said. "Sorry, my phone's been in my bag." "Oh," his voice sounded flat. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay." "I'm fine, you've been gone for hours. I told you I'd be here most of the day." "I know." There was a pause. "I just missed you." I leaned against the fence and closed my eyes. "I miss you too, really, of course. Then why does it always feel like you're happier when you're doing something without me?" That question caught me completely off guard. I looked back toward the yard. My dad was teaching my nephew how to flip burgers. My mom and Megan were laughing over something I couldn't hear. I smiled without realizing it. "I am happy right now," I admitted. Ryan went quiet, then he asked softly, "So, you don't need me to be happy?" I frowned. "What? You seem perfectly happy without me." I took a slow breath. "Ryan, that's supposed to be a good thing." "What do you mean? A healthy relationship isn't 2 people who stop having lives outside each other. It's 2 people who have full lives and choose to share them." Silence for several long seconds. Finally he spoke. "I've never thought about it that way." "I know, but I need you to." He didn't argue, he didn't get defensive. He simply said, "I'll think about it." When I hung up, I stood there for another minute staring at my phone. Part of me felt hopeful, another part wondered. How many times could we have the same conversation before one of us realized love alone wasn't enough? As I walked back toward my family, Megan looked at my face and immediately knew something was wrong. She quietly handed me a glass of lemonade and whispered, "We'll talk after everyone leaves." Something in her voice made my heart sink, because I had a feeling she was about to say something I wasn't ready to hear. That evening, after everyone had gone home, Megan and I stayed behind to help our parents clean up. The backyard was almost empty now. Paper plates were stacked on the picnic table, the grill had finally cooled down, and the sun was beginning to disappear behind the trees. My mom carried the leftovers inside, leaving just the 2 of us on the patio. Megan handed me a trash bag. "You've been quiet all day." I forced a smile. "I'm just tired." She raised an eyebrow. "Emma, you only say you're just tired when something's bothering you." I laughed softly. "You know me too well." She nodded toward the porch swing. "Come sit with me." For a few minutes neither of us spoke. The evening air was calm, and somewhere in the distance I could hear kids playing in a nearby park. Finally, I told her everything. The tick-tocks, the conversations, the guilt, the missed calls that afternoon, Ryan wondering why I could be happy without him. When I finished, Megan looked at me for a long moment before asking, "Can I tell you something that you might not like?" I nodded. "Please." She folded her hands in her lap. "When Mark and I got married, we had a rule." "What rule?" "We never expected the other person to make us feel complete." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She smiled gently. "I love my husband more than anyone in the world, but he's not responsible for my happiness. I have my own friends, my own hobbies, my own career, and he has his. That's why we still enjoy being together after all these years." I listened quietly. "If one person becomes your entire world," she paused, "eventually that world starts feeling very small." Her words settled heavily in my chest because lately my world had started feeling smaller. I painted less, I played video games less, I barely answered messages from friends anymore. Not because Ryan told me not to, because somewhere along the way I'd started feeling guilty every time my attention wasn't on him. Megan looked at me carefully. "Emma, I need you to answer one question honestly." I nodded. "When you imagine your future with Ryan, do you feel excited?" or relieved when you imagine having a day without him?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out because for the first time, I wasn't sure what the answer was, and that terrified me more than anything else. Megan's question stayed with me the entire drive home. When you imagine your future with Ryan, do you feel excited or relieved when you imagine having a day without him? I wanted the answer to be excitement. Instead, all I felt was uncertainty. That Sunday evening, Ryan came over like he usually did. He brought my favorite coffee and a small bouquet of wildflowers from the farmer's market. A few months ago, that gesture would have melted my heart. This time, it made me sad, not because I didn't appreciate it, but because I knew flowers couldn't fix what we had been avoiding. After dinner, I turned off the TV and looked at him. "Ryan, we need to talk." He took one look at my face and his smile disappeared. "Okay," I took a deep breath. "I don't think we should move in together." He stared at me. "For now, or ever." "For now." He looked down at his hands. "So, we're taking a step backward." "No, I think we're giving ourselves a chance to get this right." The room fell silent. Finally, he asked, "Do you still love me?" Tears filled my eyes. "I care about you so much." "That's not what I asked." I couldn't answer, not because I didn't care, but because I wasn't sure love was enough to erase how exhausted I'd been feeling. Ryan slowly nodded, almost as if my silence had answered the question for him. "I've been thinking too," he said quietly. "I realized something after you went to your parents' house." I looked up. "I kept waiting for you to text me. When you didn't, I felt abandoned." He paused. "But the truth is, you weren't abandoning me. You were just living your life." I felt tears rolling down my cheeks. He continued, "I think I've been expecting you to fill every empty space in mine." Neither of us spoke for a long time, then Ryan gave me a sad smile. "I don't think that's fair to either of us." I reached across the couch and took his hand one last time. "I don't want us to keep hurting each other while calling it love." He squeezed my hand gently. "I know." For the first time in months, there was no arguing, no defending ourselves. Just two people finally admitting that caring deeply for someone doesn't always mean you're right for each other. Ryan stood up, grabbed his jacket, and walked toward the front door. Before leaving, he turned around. "I hope one day we both find the kind of relationship that feels like home." I smiled through my tears. "I hope so too." The door closed softly behind him. And for the first time in a very long time, the apartment was completely silent. I expected to feel lonely. Instead, I took the deepest, calmest breath I'd taken in months. That's when I realized something I had been afraid to admit. Sometimes the hardest relationship to protect is the one you have with yourself. 3 months passed. Life looked very different than I had imagined. Ryan and I officially ended our relationship a week after that conversation. There wasn't a huge fight, no one cheated, and there wasn't a dramatic goodbye in the rain. We simply accepted a truth that had been sitting between us for months. We cared about each other. But we wanted different kinds of relationships. The first few weeks were painful. I reached for my phone more times than I could count, wanting to tell him about a funny customer at work or a new coffee shop I'd found. Sometimes I'd see something online that reminded me of him and almost sent it before remembering we weren't together anymore. Healing wasn't quick, it was quiet. Little by little, I started finding pieces of myself again. Thursday nights became my favorite tradition. I'd order takeout, light a candle, put my phone on Do Not Disturb, and spend hours painting while my favorite music played in the background. For the first time in almost a year, I didn't feel guilty for enjoying my own company. I joined a small art class downtown and met people who loved creating as much as I did. I started going to the gym 3 evenings a week, not because someone told me I should, but because I finally had the time and energy to take care of myself. One Saturday morning, while walking through a local art fair, my phone buzzed. It was Ryan. For a second, my heart skipped. The message was simple. "Hey, I just wanted to say thank you. I didn't understand what you were trying to tell me back then, but I've started seeing a therapist. I'm learning that love isn't about holding on so tightly that someone can't breathe. You were right about a lot of things, and I'm sorry I couldn't see them sooner. I truly hope you're happy." I read the message twice, then I smiled, not because I wanted him back, but because I knew he was growing just like I was. I replied with only one sentence. "I'm genuinely happy you're doing well. I wish you nothing but the best." That was the last conversation we ever had. Looking back now, I don't think Ryan was a bad person, and I don't think I was a bad girlfriend. We were simply two people who loved each other in different ways. He felt loved through constant closeness. I felt loved through trust, respect, and the freedom to still be myself. Neither of us was wrong, we just weren't right for each other. If there's one thing I learned from that relationship, it's this: the right person won't make you feel guilty for having a life outside of them. They'll encourage you to grow, cheer for your passions, and understand that healthy love isn't about losing yourself, it's about finding someone who loves the person you already are. So, was I wrong for choosing my peace over a relationship that slowly made me forget who I was? Honestly, I still think about that sometimes. But every time I sit down at my art desk, put on my headphones, and smile without feeling guilty, I think I already know the answer.